So today I want to go over some of the leaked unique gear pieces in Diablo 4. But first we have to go over the unique system as a whole because I think there's a lot of misconceptions on how the system is going to play out. So on the launch of Diablo 4, uniques are going to be the highest rarity in the game, meaning these are going to be some of the strongest items in the game, and they're being designed in a way that these items can actually allow builds to exist, either giving already made builds enough power to make them viable builds, or actually giving builds an effect that the build is created around or that allows that build to actually function. And there will be both class-specific and generic uniques, class-specific primarily being focused around one specific class ability, and generic usually being more focused around stats or an effect that every class can use. And even though uniques are going to be some of the strongest items in the game, there's one piece of them that keeps them from being an item rarity that you want in every single slot, and that is that a unique item is truly unique. And besides the special unique effect, they also have static rolls for all of the affixes. So if you get an item that has, say, crit damage, crit chance, attack speed, and strength on it, that unique would always roll those same affixes. And I'm not actually sure if those affix rolls can roll higher or lower, depending on, say, what level you are or just a randomized roll, but a unique will always have the same affix rolls, meaning that even though that power on that unique may be good for your build, the stats may be so bad that you don't want to use it, which will probably play out in most builds only having or wanting a handful of unique items. Because if you just try to slap on all uniques on your build, it would one, take a ridiculous amount of time to actually farm up all the uniques you wanted, and two, your stats may be just incredibly bad. And uniques are going to be incredibly rare. You're not going to be finding these things very often. And in fact, developers gave a statement on this saying that average players should only expect to find around 2 to 3 unique items every season. And seasons are going to last 3 months. So for more average players, you'll be getting 1 or less uniques for a month of playing. Now, obviously, more hardcore players are going to be able to find a lot more uniques than that, but these are being designed in a way so they are truly going to be chase items you're not going to find very often. And on top of that, you can't even start to get unique items until you get into World Tier 3, which you also need to be level 50 to even unlock. And on top of that, certain uniques won't be able to be obtained until you get higher than World Tier 3, because every new World Tier past World Tier 3 is also going to unlock more for you to obtain in those higher difficulties. So there may be a unique item that would be perfect for a build you're trying to create that would make your build just ridiculously OP, but you may have to get to a higher World Tier to even have the chance of obtaining that unique. And the developers have also stated that we'll be getting uniques every new season. So every 3 months, there should be some more unique items for you to go chase. So with an understanding of the unique system, I wanted to go over some of the data mined uniques that we actually have information for. Now, I don't think these are actually all of the uniques in the game, and I don't know where this information was data mined from. I'm not sure if it was data mined from the end game closed beta that had an NDA on it that happened 6 to 7 months ago, or if these were data mined from the most recent public beta. I'm assuming these were probably all obtained from that endgame closed beta because these would actually be obtainable on that. But keep all of that in mind that this is data mined information, and I don't personally think these are all the uniques that are going to be in the game on launch, but these do give an idea of some of the effects you can expect to be getting on these items. Now keep in mind these are data mined. A lot of them are a bit weird to read, but the primary thing I want to look at is their special effects. So first off, we have a generic unique amulet called the Melted Heart of Salig. It rolls with core stats all, damage to spenders, damage healthy, and resource gain. Not sure what core stats all is, but damage spenders would be an increase to any skill that costs a resource. Damage healthy would be an increased damage to any enemies above 80% health, and resource gain would most likely just be a increase to the resources gained, probably a percentage. But then the unique effect on this is really interesting. using. And the first part is you gained additional maximum resource. So this is probably just a percentage increase to the maximum resource you can hold. So say if a druid could hold 100 spirit, they may be able to hold 120 spirit now. But in addition, when you take damage, you instead drain a resource for every point of life you would have lost instead. So now you're actually losing your main resource before you're losing any health. And this unique could obviously be horrible for certain builds. If you have a build that is very heavy on spending your main class resource, this would be completely horrible. You would never have any resource left, so you can never do any damage. But there are some builds out there, and there are probably going to be a lot more, that don't use their primary resource very often. In fact, in the most recent public betas, there was actually a sorceress build that you pretty much used nothing that actually spent any of your mana. And this was primarily focused around the Hydra, but you were using all skills that didn't use any of your mana. So this could actually be really good for that build, making it a lot tankier by using up your mana when taking damage instead of your health on a build that doesn't even use their mana. And next up, we have a rogue unique in another amulet called Word of Hakan. Now this rolls with damage type bonus, non-physical, ultimate damage, crit damage with imbued, and skill rank bonus to the imbued category. So damage type bonus to anything that's not physical, so that's any other element, damage increase to ultimate, which seems to be a more unique affix, crit damage with imbued, and imbues are a rogue specific category, and then skill rank bonus to imbuements. Not sure how much this is, but this gives at least +1 skill rank to the entire imbuement category, meaning with this you could use all 3 imbuements just off of this one item. But the unique effect is your rain of arrows is always imbued with all imbuements at once. So I'm assuming how this is actually going to work is anytime you use an imbuement and then use Rain of Arrows, that Rain of Arrows is going to get the imbuements of every single imbuement the rogue can have at the same time. Now I'm also assuming how this is going to work is that it's actually going to pull the stats and effects off of your actual imbuement skills from your skill tree. So if you have 5 points into every imbuement, it's going to be much stronger imbuements for everything applied to Rain of Arrows. But if you have all imbuements at rank 1, that's going to be the strength of all the imbuements when you cast Rain of Arrows. So this is completely going to facilitate an imbue focused build that uses Rain of Arrows as your main damaging ability, or at least your big damaging moment. And next up, we have a pair of unique sorcerer's pants called Iceheart Brise, and this rolls with an increase to intelligence, increased damage to frozen enemies, increased damage to low life enemies, and an increase to the freezing duration. Now the special effect on these is enemies that die while frozen have a chance to unleash Frost Nova. Now Frost Nova is a sorcerer's ability that is an AoE freeze around the sorcerers normally, but this would be around the enemy that died while frozen. So this means if you kill a frozen enemy in a big pack of enemies and it casts Frost Nova, it then freezes everything around it that then you can kill, that then will also have a chance to cast another Frost Nova, meaning this could be an incredibly strong perma CC build. Now with most of the gear pieces in the game that specifically affect class skills, they should also take the upgrades and effects of that skill into account. So there's some pretty good interactions you could have with this. For instance, one of the upgrades for Frost Nova is that any enemy hit by Frost Nova gives you 4 mana. And you could see how potentially ridiculous this interaction can be, where you're just casting tons of Frost Novas by killing frozen enemies, then freezing more enemies and killing those, and everything being hit by these Frost Novas is giving you 4 mana. This could generate you ridiculous amounts of mana when fighting large groups of enemies. So next up, we have a Necromancer Unique amulet called Death Speaker's Pendant. And I wanted to look specifically at this one because after I started to look at all the uniques, this was the Necromancer one that caught my eye because this plays perfectly into the build I was creating in the most recent beta. So this rolls with a damage increase to blood damage, a damage increase to seemingly all of your Necromancer summons, a passive rank bonus to the Coalesce Blood passive, which increases all of your blood damage, and a percentage increase to your healing, which a lot of your blood skills also heals you in some way. Now the special is where this gets pretty ridiculous. So anytime you cast a blood surge, which is a necromancer skill that you do this AoE that deals some damage, but deals pretty big increased damage for every enemy that you suck blood from with this skill. And now when you cast Blood Surge, it casts a mini nova on all of your minions, dealing damage. And the damage is increased per target drained by your initial cast of Blood Surge. It's basically casting a copy of your Blood Surge skill that was used by your character, but casting that on all of your minions, and the damage is being increased by how many initial targets were hit by your Blood Surge. And normally the Blood Surge skill has damage increase from 10 to 50% increase depending on how many enemies were hit, and that's probably how the one cast on your minions is also going to work. This is an incredibly strong skill that works perfectly with the build I was trying to create. And next up we have a Druid Unique chest called Mad Wolf's Glee, and this rolls with a damage increase to physical, a damage increase to poison, a damage reduction to poison, and movement speed increase. And the effect on this is kind of crazy. So werewolf form is now your true form, and you gain +2 ranks to all werewolf skills. Now I'm assuming what werewolf form is now your true form means is that instead of being in a human form most of the time, you're just in werewolf form at all times. Unless you go cast a spell that's not in werewolf, then that would take you to your normal form. Not exactly sure, but I think at a baseline, you're always just going to be a werewolf walking around, which is really cool. It would also be pretty cool is if when using this unique, even if you went and cast, say, a tornado, that it would keep you in werewolf and your werewolf just pulls out a staff and uses a tornado. That would honestly be pretty hilarious, but I think people who want a transform style of build would really like this unique. Besides the fact that you just get +2 ranks to all werewolf skills, which is really strong anyway, just the effect of always being a werewolf I think is probably going to be really cool. And then finally we have a Barbarian Unique, a two-handed sword called Fields of Crimson that rolls with a damage increase to your two-handed slashing weapon, a damage increase to dot damage or a dot damage proc, a cooldown reduction to your rupture skill, and a skill rank bonus to your rupture skill as well. Now rupture on the Barbarian is a skill that does some damage and also ruptures all bleeding effects on that target, dealing all their damage at once. Now the special effect on this is that while using this weapon, so you have to use this weapon with rupture and apply the weapon to be used anytime you use rupture, but when damaging at least one enemy with rupture, you create a blood pool that inflicts bleeding damage over time, and any enemies standing in this blood pool also take a percentage increase to bleeding damage. So I think this is obviously really strong for a bleeding build and going to actually change up how rupture is generally used. So rupture is generally used as kind of a finisher. You would apply a bunch of bleeds to a target, then you would rupture them, doing all that bleed damage at once. But with this, you're probably going to want to be using rupture as one of your starting skills because it creates this bleed over time on the ground that makes them take increased bleed damage. Then you apply all your bleeds and then maybe rupture again at the end, because this also gives a cooldown reduction to rupture, meaning it's a skill you can use a lot more often. So this is just going to be ridiculously strong for bleeding builds that are using rupture. And I'm very curious to see how strong builds with this specific weapon play out. So I think that gives a pretty good overview on unique items as a whole in Diablo 4 and some of the examples of some of the uniques we'll be getting in the game on launch. And I'll have the link to where you can check out all the uniques we currently know of, but that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.